This is the Tree of Life Season 3 Chapter 5. In this episode, we will be integrating our thoughts regarding sublimation with sexual selection. To begin, in past episodes, we talked about how archetypal consensual lineal lines maintain a tit-for-tat relationship with lineal line members. In other words, there is displacement within the line through intersections, or substitution events, which temporarily decrease the fitness of one individual to the benefit of the other. This displacement results in the individual, who is temporarily losing fitness, to meet the expectations of the other linearly related individual. However, unlike with encounters between a spatial non-consensual and an archetypal consensual actor, where there is expectation matching, the spatial actor's expectations are predominantly sexual in nature. In displacement within lineal lines, the expectations are spatial and belong to the conjoined consensuality. Which is to say, that the individual who is acting further to those expectations is losing fitness, whilst the other is gaining a kind of spatial territoriality created by the agency of action. Now, to return to the dance floor example. Individuals who are capable of sublimating in response to a state of arousal produced by a spatial non-consensual actor acquire greater attractiveness to potential mates within the environment. I indicated this is because the ability to sublimate, although counterintuitive, indicates some degree of resource accumulation, which is symptomatic of the likelihood that any offspring will be successfully cared for. But it also has an added benefit of demonstrating an ability to be socially abstinent in the face of potential suitors, who might compete with the spatial non-consensual actor. Now, I explained how in this exchange the territoriality of the first spatial non-consensual actor is in play through the act of sublimation. This idea was that in the act of sublimating the arousal caused by the first actor, there is a true linking of both actors to the sublimating language. Which is to say, in the deferral of the expectations of the spatial non-consensual actor, there is reliance and a risk, ultimately, that those expectations will be met or accommodated. In other words, in the interactions between the spatial non-consensual actor and the archetypal consensual actor, the deferral of the expectations of the spatial non-consensual actor requires expression of the feeling, or the result is extinction of the feeling with concomitant effects on the epigenetic machinery of expression. The imposition of an archetypal assignment on the spatial non-consensual actor is part of this deferral as well. In the act of sublimation, there is an opportunity for the archetypal consensual individual to link particular objects of consciousness to the language which the spatial non-consensual actor absorbs. In other words, the archetypal consensual actor utilizes the same process of archetypal assignment to unsuccessful mates, which is used with offspring. The only difference is that in the first case, there is displacement to the archetypal lineal line, no reciprocation, whereas in the second there is reciprocal altruism. All of this is to say that the same mechanism, which promotes the assumption of archetypes by offspring and the passing of the portion within lineal lines, is used socially with respect to unsuccessful suitors, without the reciprocation. Since these archetypal assignments are encoded epigenetically, they have semi-permanent impacts on the gene expression of the unsuccessful suitors, as loss of fitness, or gene expression associated with appealing sexual characteristics. Since society essentially functions on conformity created by patterns of synchronization in bodily rhythms, the epigenetic framework for social competition arises out of the status quo created by these common states of arousal and rules regarding sociality. In other words, the overarching design of the system functions to maintain a status quo with respect to archetypal induced epigenetic profiles. All of this means that the spatial non-consensual actor selects for sublimation in mates automatically despite it being against interest in terms of reproductive success. That's the end of the podcast for today.